when engaged in those activities. That sends a very robust message, especially coming from the Americans, coming from a unanimous vote by the Security Council. All of this must also be deterring the regime, in addition to the facts on the ground, which are changing against their own hold on power, to not engage in the kind of massive assault or violence that we feared just a few days ago.
And presumably the UN's aim is to make sure that those people around him, those powerful figures who are still loyal to him, will think twice about remaining loyal. Who are the main figures here? I mean, if there's one person whose defection would ultimately really signal something major, who would that man be, and is he likely to go, do you think?
Good question. Two people, I think, are key at this moment. One is Abdullah Sanusi, close confidant, right-hand man, former head of intelligence, mastermind of a lot of operations outside and inside the country. He's not been heard from in a while. He is known to have close contacts with people outside of Libya. He wields tremendous influence. He's a game-changing person. The other person, incidentally and surprisingly, wasn't on the list of people under a travel ban, was Musa Kosa, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Musa Kosa was the one who negotiated the 2003 normalization agreement between Libya and the Western powers. Maybe he was exempted because he could be a bridge between Libya and the outside world. He was a former also head of intelligence. Were he to defect, that would, in my view, be devastating to the loyalists that remain around him. So two individuals to go, many others we haven't heard from, possibly under house arrest.
And many we have heard from, some of whom are sitting in Beda talking about forming an interim government. And I would assume that a number of those people, ambassadors, politicians, who have defected so far, or who have distanced themselves from this regime, are hoping that they can be part of a new regime. They can still maintain some degree of influence in the future. How likely is that? How much do you think the protesters will accept members of the old guard being involved in a new setup?
I think protesters would accept individuals who don't have blood on their hands. There are a lot of Libyan civil servants in the diplomatic corps and the political establishment who served under Gaddafi but did not engage in acts of violence. They will be acceptable. They also represent important tribal bases and important segments of the Libyan society at large. Any transitional government, and we're seeing elements of this emerge. We're seeing city councils at the local level, and we're seeing a provisional government perhaps emerging from Benghazi. Any transitional government, should it be successful, will have to involve many of the people who served under Gaddafi. To the extent that they're accepted, I think they are key to ensuring safety, to ensuring stability, and to ensuring that the transition is a smooth one.
All right, Tariq Youssef, thanks once again. Now, Australia has also moved to put pressure on Libya's government. It's imposing its own unilateral sanctions. The Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd, has told Al Jazeera that more measures will probably need to be taken against Gaddafi and his regime.
The actual teeth of this UN Security Council resolution are quite sharp. Firstly, in terms of the targeted sanctions against members of the regime, this is very important. The Gaddafi family has significant financial assets invested around the world, including in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. This therefore affects directly personal financial interests. Secondly, an arms embargo is necessary in order to prevent the further resupply of military equipment to those military units remaining supportive of Gaddafi. And thirdly, the criminal court reference is important. It's only the second time in the history of the UN this has been done. It's not so much that Gaddafi himself may take notice of this, but those underneath him must realise that in executing any command to take violent action against civilians, these people who have pulled triggers will be brought to justice as well.
Let me stop you there if I could for a moment. Just forgive me for interrupting, but the point remains that the fact is that Gaddafi has, for 40 years now, more or less snubbed his nose at the international community anyway. These threats, these sanctions will mean nothing to him, particularly since he's already vowed to die a martyr in Libya should the need arise. So my question remains, in between the time that these sanctions that you say are not toothless, they're very sharp-toothed, when they actually have an effect on the country in some sense, in between that time and now, there could still be enormous bloodshed. What is the international community going to do if he uses the arms he already has against his own people and starts causing some serious bloodshed?
The first thing I'd say also is that you said that Gaddafi himself may be contemptuous of these measures. Those underneath him who take his commands may actually be attentive to these measures, because that is the whole purpose of the International Criminal Court. However, I also believe that further action needs to be taken by the Council. You mentioned before the desirability of no-fly zones over Libya. We in Australia fully support that course of action. In my own correspondence with the President of the Security Council, I have said that Australia fully supports the imposition of no-fly zones within Libya itself.
Well, some are suggesting that one of the reasons why world leaders are now being more outspoken about Libya is because they've managed to get most of their own citizens out of the country. But the evacuations have been far from easy. Dan Nolan has the details of one rather hairy evacuation accomplished by the British military.
Relieved British oil workers arrive in Malta after being rescued from Libya in a secret military operation. 2 British Air Force C-130 Hercules planes are believed to have entered Libyan airspace without permission, landing in the desert south of Benghazi. The British government won't reveal exact locations, but media reports suggest airfields at Nafura and Amal were used to collect around 150 stranded British oil workers before flying them to safety in Malta.
There was scheduled to be 65, but in the end there was about 130 got on.
Really?
Yeah.
And
we were sitting in the aisles. It's very cramped, but we were just glad to be out of there and getting on the flights.
The British government has faced criticism for not doing enough to rescue its nationals, particularly those cut off from the port cities of Tripoli and Benghazi, where Navy ships can be used. More air missions will be required, with hundreds more British oil workers still stranded in the south.
As I said, there's still people in the desert, so I can't say too much. I can't say where I came from, etc., etc. Because the guys down there are still doing an excellent job to gather all the guys together and get them evacuated.
With most of their workers being evacuated, Libya's oil facilities are pumping just a trickle, some reduced to 10% of full capacity. Dan Nolan, Al Jazeera.
Well, one country that has already had its own uprising that it appears has now been completed is Egypt. Now, as it tries to get back to life as normal, one of the things it's trying to do is regain its position as a major tourism destination. Tourism accounts for 11% of the country's economy. 1 in 8 jobs depends upon it. But as Andrew Simmons reports now from Luxor, there are still no signs that the tourists are coming back.
The waters of the Nile, a voyage through ancient history that's always attracted foreigners. Not now. Egypt's revolution won new freedoms, but its tourism industry is still in shackles. No visitors, no business. Yet nearly everyone living and working here in Luxor depends on tourism. If things were normal, these cruise ships would be crammed with holidaymakers plying along the Nile. Instead, they're all at anchor, as far as the eye can see, and there isn't a tourist in sight. Hotels have single-figure occupancy, most of their staff sent home, restaurants are either closed or struggling to stay open. Yet it's peaceful here, even though soldiers maintain a presence, bored with little to do. Egypt's ancient attractions stand proud with no crowds. Last year, more than 14.5 million foreigners came to see them. Now, at any time of day, you're pushed to find a few, and most of them are Egyptians.
But there's something very interesting about the column here for Amenhotep III, about 22 meters high.
The only tour guide at Karnak says it's getting near breaking point.
You work day by day. Sometimes have a job, sometimes no job, but now no any job. For they stay at home, we spend from our pocket all the money, maybe one day the money is finished.
The Valley of the Kings, it should be 10,000 tourists a day. Instead, Mustafa El-Gindi, former opposition member of parliament and one of the revolution's key players, is able to give a rare private viewing of King Tutankhamun's tomb. Mr. El-Gindi says if the economy is to be revived, the land of the pharaohs needs tourists to heed his appeal.
We are suffering, definitely we are suffering, but they are ready to come. We need you now to tell the whole world that you respect Egypt, that you support the revolution in Egypt, and you are here to support the economy of this country.
Tour companies are slowly responding and the country is ready. Next month should see an upturn, but it has to be big if the new Egypt is to get what it needs, the first step in reviving its economy. Andrew Simmons, Al Jazeera, Luxor, Egypt.
Well, Magdi Sobi is the Deputy Director of the Al-Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies. He's also an economist and he joins us from Cairo. Thank you for being with us. Describe for us, if you would, the state of Egypt's economy. I'm sure that tourism is not the only problem you've got right now.
Yes, I think the tourism is one of the major problems nowadays because, you know, it is interlinkages to other sectors in the economy is very large and it actually absorbs a lot of people working in the sector.
But as far as the broader picture is concerned, how much work needs to be done to get Egypt moving again? Is there an enormous amount of structural, institutional reform that needs to be accomplished before the country can really begin to make progress?
I think above all, we need actually a more stable environment in political and security terms. Once we get this, we have to do a lot of job actually in the policy of the government. We need a new tax system. We need a new transparent environment in business and other sectors. We need actually, above all, antitrust law just to absorb a lot of foreign direct investment and to absorb more tourism from abroad.
Have you seen in what's been going on with this interim government, the military leaders and the new appointees, that they appreciate these requirements? Have you seen them acting on these elements that you just brought up?
Yes, to somehow. Actually, we are speaking about days, not months or years to re-establish the economy. But I think the new ministers in the cabinet have some vision about the tax system, about how to inject money in the market to revive it. Actually, because more than two-thirds of the economy is depending on consumption. And if you have more equitable income distribution, you will have a lot of changes in the market, actually, and a lot of new production coming to the market.
There is an entrenched set of interests, economic and political, still in Egypt, many of them remaining in government from the previous regime. Are you fearful at all that the reshaped economy may eventually end up like the old one, with some individuals seizing power, creating a corrupt system whereby the money doesn't go where it should?
Yes, I think we need a major change in financial policy and a major change actually in competition and antitrust law. You have corruption go side by side by the monopolistic tendencies in the markets. Then if you have a new actually environment in business, you will have a lot of people investing